All right, welcome to today's session. My name is Adam Kurtz. I'm with Sylvan Software, and today we'll be talking about creating sales plans and budgets in Stratum, importing data into Stratum. Here's the agenda for today. I will be talking about a feature called data import. There's some setup criteria that we can discuss. Importing data from Excel is now available through the interface. So that's something we'll show you today, and we'll show you the steps involved in importing a sales plan into Stratum. And obviously we'll go through a demo. So we'll talk about the process and then we'll demonstrate it. First and foremost, the Stratum Data Hub, essentially it's an overall view of the application where you can see all the applications on the inner circle. And then on the left side, you've got the Stratum link and Stratum Analyst Hub. And this is getting data into Stratum. And then on the right side, you see the arrows pointing out that's getting data out. So today we'll be concentrating on spreadsheet import, and that's part of the Stratum Analyst Hub. So if you're interested after today's session, we can talk about whether you're licensed for that and whether you have access to that. And if you don't, we can certainly talk about getting access to that feature if you're interested. So today, obviously, you might most certainly have data coming in from your ERP into Stratum through traditional ETL methods. We can see that the data for your sales, your master files, that all the ERP necessary tables to get that transaction data into Stratum is already in place. So we already know that sales data, inventory, and open orders, or any other type of data that you're sourcing from your ERP is already happening. And now we also see down in the middle, we've got an Excel process where an analyst doesn't necessarily need to contact or rely on IT, where they can then import data using Excel, and based on metadata configuration, they can actually map that data into Stratum. So we're going to concentrate on that piece today, and presuming that the other traditional methods are already in place. And then obviously you now have the ability to import data from Excel to marry into your sales data. So for comparative purposes, where you can now see your transaction data versus your budget data. Data import access. So who has access to that? Well, certainly if you have a named user license of Stratum, you have full access to everything. So that is something that you already have access to then. If you're not in a named user license structure, then you would need to license this piece through the Stratum Analyst Hub. If you've purchased Stratum Planning, which is an old term that we use for the write-back capabilities, you automatically have access to this as well. So depending on your licensing situation, you may already have access to these features. And that's something we can talk about more offline. If you contact me, I'll show you my contact information at the end of the session. This feature does require that your backend is on SQL Server. So your Stratum database must reside on SQL Server, not the iSeries. And on top of that, you must be on version 7.1 or greater to use this feature. And if you're not, then certainly we can talk about upgrading you. And it's not a difficult thing to do. So basically, security and view administrators have full permissions to import this data. Advanced and casual users can access some of these features, but administrators will have to give them direct access to the data import window. And then they can kind of work with the data imports on their own. The category itself, the actual category that you're importing data into, has to be set up. So there's some setup features through Viewer that you would need to do to set up the feature, set up the category so that Stratum knows that you're importing data as user data as opposed to corporate data. So you can see here I've got some categories set up under my category menu within the Stratum interface that I can toggle onto user data as opposed to corporate data. Corporate meaning it's coming from your ERP. So that, obviously would need to be set up for the category. The category obviously has to exist within Stratum, and then you would have to set it up as a user related category as opposed to corporate. I know it's probably a little more text on this slide than I wanted, but it kind of explains what the data import does. Obviously, it's user oriented or curated data within Excel. It has to come from Excel. It is imported directly into the Stratum data hub through the viewer data import piece that we'll take a look at. And you can import actually lots of types of data. You can set up a category to import plans and budgets, demographic data, market trends. You might be getting data from IRI, or you might be getting point of sale data from your retailers. Those would be good candidates for that. And anything else that might make sense for your business. The nice thing about this is that when you kick it off, it actually runs the job behind the scenes and immediately processes the data so that you can actually see the data within minutes after kicking off the import job. We look at this as empowering everyday users, helping them accomplish their analysts, the things that they have to do as analysts, data scientists, tasks without needing to rely on IT as much. So this is something that we see as an open door to that. And there's different ways to get to it depending on the version that you're using, data import, but I'll be using the hamburger menu. Normally it's under admin utilities for pre 7.3 versions. We'll take a look at the data mapping window, but once you import the file, you'll be routed to a window that will allow you to map the data into Stratum. So we'll take a closer look at that in the demo. The Excel format, there's actually two types of Excel formats that you can use. I'll be using today a horizontal format, and you can see a snapshot of that right there, where you can see that my months are going across my columns in a horizontal fashion. So this is the example that I'll be using today for my data import. As you can see, it's basically a flat file within Excel that has my region. It's got my customers in it, product brands and products, and then obviously I've got a monthly forecast going out to the right there on the horizon. The tags, you can use a different type of file called a transactional file, where, as you can see, the dates are now part of the record as opposed to a column. And this is more classic transactional formatted. So either one we will accept. A lot of times I'll see analysts using data files like this because it's easier to work with the data within the months, as opposed to, obviously using a filter and getting the months that you need out of here from the actual transaction days. I guess it all depends on where the data comes from at the end of the day. So as you can see, you've got two options of formatting your data to get it into Stratum. How do we get to the data import process once it's set up and ready to go? Well, as I said before, it depends on the version that you're using. You can see under admin utilities, I can access data and import there. Or my hamburger menu, as you can see, I can click on the hamburger menu and then go under analyst tools and then into data import. So again, depending on the version, if you're 7.3 or greater, you'll be using the hamburger menu. And then prior versions, it'll be admin utilities. Once you get to that menu, either way, it's going to be the same menu. You'll see prior jobs that you've run, and then you'll click on the new button to kick off a new data import job. It'll then ask you to select a file. You'll browse your hard drive and select the file that you've created for this data import. Once the file is selected, then you'll see a menu where you have to tell Stratum a little bit more about the file. You've got some general questions there to answer. Are you going to be adding the data or replacing the data? So you have an option there. You have to select a target category. So there's, like we saw before, we only had a couple categories that were user-oriented. So obviously those are only going to show up here. And no, you will not be able to write data into your sales category. That would be impossible. And then on the bottom half of that menu is more formatted questions. How did you format the file? Is it the time series or is it the horizontal? How many header rows do you have? What row contains the data for your dates? And if so, what format does it look like? So, those are you'll have to answer these questions once you, and they're not hard, obviously. Once you do that, the data then gets imported into the designer, and then you can actually start mapping the data to your dimensions and your measures. There's some smart mapping that may occur depending on how you name your dimensions. Try to stick with the same terminology that you're using within Stratum. And then obviously we won't be loading in master data when we're importing sales plan or budget data. The master file import is a separate process. And looks like I got an extra slide there. Once you map the data, there's a verify process, and then you can kick it off to actually write the data back. The verify process will verify your data. If there's any problems, it'll tell you to review your data, or otherwise it'll confirm with you that your data looks great, and then you're ready to kick it off. You'll get an email when the job completes so that you know that your data import has completed, and you can then start going in and analyzing the data. Here's the actual data that I imported, the plan amount from my Excel spreadsheet. And as you can see, it's imported in according to the dimensions I had within my file. And so within minutes, I was able to get a plan or a budget into my Stratum interface and then actually view it and analyze it. So we'll step through some of this in the demo so you can kind of see it in action. Obviously, we're just looking at PowerPoint slides. So I'd like to show you actually how it occurs within the product. So we're going to take a look at that. Before we get into that, there is my email address and my phone number. You might want to jot that down or do a quick screen print on that in case you want to contact me for further information about today's session. You can always go to our website listed there, www.sylvan.com, or go to customernet.sylvan.com. Customernet.sylvan.com has a brand new forums area for that has been redesigned. So I strongly recommend checking out our customer net site. And there's just a plethora of information you can get from Stratum from that site. So make sure you check that out. We've got a brand new menu system for our knowledge base. And I definitely encourage you to check that out. So don't miss out on that. And as you can see, other channels of information are available too. So this will also be available on YouTube and CustomerNet. So we record all of our sessions. So that's something that you can look forward to reviewing the session as needed. All right, well, enough commercials. Now we'll get into the demo. So here's my Stratum interface. And as I said, I'll be setting up a data import. So I'm going to, on my right-hand side, go to my my hamburger menu here, and I am going to select my analyst tools, and there I can see data import. So I'll select that, and as you can see, I've got some jobs that I've submitted throughout the last couple of years. In this case, I will click on new so that I can go out and select my Excel file that has my plan in it. And so here I'll go up and I will go to my desktop and I will go into a folder where I know I've got these examples. And so here's my sales plan example. I select the file. It is now going in and importing that data. And as you can see, I now have to answer these questions. I'm going to add, or you can do an add or replace. And then I'm going to tell it that is a time series, so it's horizontal, my file. And before we even, so let's take a look at this file. You can always open the file and you can take a look at it. You know, if you don't know what these answers are, you can always review the file. So let's take a look at it in Excel. And so there is the file. And if I go up to the top, here we can see that this is what my file looks like. So I've got regions, I've got customer sold to, product, and product brand. So region, sold to, product, brand, and product, 4 dimensions. And then my plan, as you can see, is going out in a horizontal fashion, in a time series fashion. All right. And then my headers, looks I've got 3 columns of header rows, right? And then my data begins. So on the 3rd row are my dates. All right. So now I can answer those questions. If I go back into viewer, I can then say, okay, we know it's a time series. We know we've got 3 header rows. And then that the row that contains my transaction date is actually on that 3rd row. And what does it look like? Month, day, year. So that's essentially what I want to select here. Month, day, year is year, 4 digits. So we'll select that. And I'm going to select that. So those are my selections. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And it's going to suck that data into my designer. I'm going to close out my left frame. And here I can see that, yes, I've done this before, and it already knows that how to map this data based on my metadata. So as you can see, it remembered my dimensions. It remembered to ignore my descriptions because I'm not going to load those in. I'm only going to load in my codes and my data. And as I scroll here to the right, I can see that there's my plan amounts, and those have all been mapped to my measure called plan amount. Other columns over here are being ignored. And so that's it. That's my data. That's what I want to import. If I click on validate, it's good. So it likes what it sees and it's ready to go. It's actually ready to kick off. So then I would then go ahead and click on my submit button, and it will then go ahead and warn me. It could take some time depending on how many records I have. Nevertheless, you know, it allows you to cancel or kick it off from here as well. Once you get that email, you'll then have the ability to go in and run a view and look at the plan. So here I can see my plan, and this is exactly the file that I imported. And so here it is within Stratum. I can aggregate it up to region if I want. I can drill down to my customers if I want to see a specific customer combination. I can click on a given customer and brand combination and go to the item level and see what those items are for that particular customer. I can open up my View Explorer if I want to add in sales for that year. Maybe I've got some, I'm going to right click and show that measure, and now I can actually do some comparisons for my sales versus my plan for each month. As I start to accrue transactions for my months throughout the year, I'm able to actually do some comparative analysis now that I've got my sales plan in, and I can compare that to my actuals. We can see areas where I've got sales with a forecast with no sales. That's always a bad thing. Or I've missed my number badly. You know, these are the things where if I add in a calculated measure, then I can actually go ahead and you know, start doing some math on these where I missed. You know, where did I miss this? Right here, I can just calculate a quick variance on these numbers. and see, what this might look like from a variance percent um, perspective, right? We can give it a var percent column header there. And I think I've got the wrong measure name in there. Let's try this. I did not like that. Well, nevertheless, you should be able to, oh, I'm sorry, there we go. I was missing a paren. And there we go. So you've got a variance percent now that you can assess. We could see where we're getting close to our numbers. 10% isn't too bad for forecast error, but some of these are outlandish. You definitely want to keep an eye on those. So and then and furthermore, I could do a traffic light on that column. So if I want to do a quick traffic light on that column, so I can highlight some of these conditionals, get some of these conditions, and I can pick a global one if I wanted to, forecast accuracy. I can then plop that in there and see what I get, and I see just from a default forecast accuracy, I could see cautionary areas where I'm fairly close, gray areas, which are good. I'm close enough. And then the red areas, scream, that I need a new forecast. So this is, just all from importing the data from my spreadsheet. I'm able to actually then use that data within seconds or minutes, compare that data with my transaction data that I already have within Stratum, and then do some analysis and compare that against my transactional data and start identifying areas where I need better forecasts or better plans. Okay. And so that all resonates with just importing data from that Excel file, from that having a plan or a forecast that you've already created. And now you want to incorporate that and make this available. So now all users, I can actually save this view and all users can come in and benefit from, the budget data or plan data that I imported in from this Excel spreadsheet. So again, it's just part of using the data import process, part of the data hub where the user or the analyst now drives the process of getting that budget into Stratum and relies less on IT for some of those processes. And so, obviously that's available now through the Stratum interface.